Before we start this question and answer session, I ask you just to think about these days and turn to your neighbor, maybe stand up, it helps, and turn to your neighbor and mention one gift to him or her what you get today. From the fellowship, from God, from workshops, from speakers. Okay? Stand up and share one gift what you got this day. Tell it to your neighbor. You can also do this in this row. If you want, it helps for you also. Just refresh yourself. I also want to share because I haven't a neighbor, I also want to share my gift, what I've got. When I was sitting there, I was just looking these flags. There are 25 flags, and maybe some of these flags wouldn't be next to each other in another conference, because some of these flags are in tension or there are conflicts. And I think in this Hungarian forest, these are very special days that we are together and we have similar passions. And I just want to say thank you that you are here. Thank you for your energy, and thank you that that you are open to do your work in your country, because there are many people who really need your passion, your heart, your support, and your voice. So just thank you that you do your work in your country. It really helps. And this is the time for questions and answers. Usually I am a kind person, but this time I won't be, because my task that it has to be a question and answers. So if somebody starts sharing stories, I will stop him or her. If somebody starts take a long question, I will ask him or her to shorten it, so I will be tough. But this is a time for question and answers. If you have any question to the speakers, I ask you to stand up. Ola will help us with the microphone. And yes, raise your hand, it's good. We can start. And I ask you just to mention your first name, the country, and the question you ask, who would like you to answer it.
I'm Kazimir, I'm from Poland, and my question is how to prevent, in the best possible way, the appearance of same-sex attraction in the youths, in the children. How to prevent it not to happen in their adult life. Thank you.
Do you have anybody who? All together. And please help. Oh, thank you. There is a microphone, please. This is your microphone. You can use that.
I would have two suggestions. First of all, if that's a true need and it's immediate, read Dr. Nicolosi's book on preventing homosexuality, a guide for parents to prevent homosexuality. That's not the accurate title, but if you will look at that, that, in my opinion, holds the keys to almost everything. It's not that you have to believe every single little thing he says in the book, but it's all there. It's what we use for most clients. And number two, it's really quite simple, even though sometimes it may be hard. You have an authentic, loving, bonded relationship with the parents. You can make mistakes, you can have some tough times, but if you're keeping the relationship intact in the bonds of true love, that is one of the finest ways to prevent the issues.
So that's individually. I'm going to speak at a public policy level. Where we have influence, we should not be normalising the sexualisation of our children as young as 4 and 5, as we are in English schools. So we need to be working at policy level, local level and national levels to prevent that, to resist that. And in countries where you haven't got that, then you should absolutely do it. The kind of project that we saw outlined earlier today by, it was the Protecting the Public Safety, it was the Dr. Szymon, yes, he's here.
Szymon Grzelak
there
from
he
Poland.
is. That program in the schools is a model. There are models, and that's I'm going to be saying you need to get those into your schools and into church youth groups, also to church pastors and youth leaders, please, to get this sort of stuff normalised. We need to get speaking about it.
Okay. Yes, but maybe there are other questions also. Okay. Is there anybody else?
Don't be shy.
Okay, here. And after it.
I have a question for the therapists. What help is there available for people who are married to a person of the opposite sex with same-sex attraction? Whether it's a man married to a woman or a woman married to a man, or if they're just in a relationship but not yet married.
Your question was, what help is there available?
What help is there available? Yeah.
Well, of course, there's psychotherapy, right? And there are also groups that are forming in every country. And so I would say that the first and most important thing is to get therapy. This is a very complex issue. It has its origins in childhood, early childhood.
I'm asking about the non-same-sex.
Oh, the spouses. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So for the spouses, again, we recommend that. When I have married clients and the husband is my client, I recommend to the wife to get her own therapy. I have a list of Christian therapists I refer to who know the work I do. They may not be therapists who do this as their specialty, but they know and understand the work I do, and they provide support to the spouse. And that's most important. On some occasions, for example, I treat men, if the husband wants it, I will actually treat the couple. Sometimes it can become a little difficult because then I have two clients. One is the individual and the other is the couple. But sometimes I provide that support myself. Okay?
There are support groups, Courage for Catholics, Courage and Encourage. It can be found online. Encourage helps family members. And in the United States, there's PFOX, Parents and Friends of Exes. They have support for family members. And I don't know there is more specifically in Europe. And if there isn't something, well, then all you activists out there know what you need to do. Okay, not all of you, but, you know.
Szymon from Poland. I have a question to IFTCC authorities. Could you consider a possibility of writing a letter and asking for a meeting with Pope Francis in order to share the international experience concerning the issues that we are talking about here? Could you at least consider such a possibility, even if you think that it wouldn't work anyway?
You know, it sounds like a great idea. I would need to know somebody who knows the diplomacy and so on, and how you go about it. But I would love, and I don't know if it would be, I don't know if there's anything that could be said, you know, in that particular situation, but I would love for an opportunity to educate people in churches, you know, pastors, even as you speak, the Vatican. I don't know what the reception would be right now, but I mean, I would love the opportunity if it could happen.
Szymon, it's a very good suggestion, but I would say we need to think about it, because just sending a letter to somewhere and we don't really know will it reach whom, so it needs to be really thought about it.
I agree, it's a really good idea. I see others have done something similar this week. We would have to be advised by our Roman Catholic friends. We would not do anything without their advice and support. I have to say that we wrote a lovely letter to the German ambassador. It's a very nice letter. He didn't reply. We did go to the US ambassador. We spent a whole day there. We came from Malta and all parts of the United Kingdom. It was a beautiful letter, but they wouldn't even receive it when we got to the gate. They would not physically take it out of our hands. They told me I had to mail it, so I did, by registered post. They did not acknowledge it. However, there is a happy ending to the story. We also wrote a good letter to the Spanish ambassador and spent time standing outside of that embassy in London. And they responded and said that they would send the letter to the appropriate authority.
How about inviting the Pope to the forest in Hungary next year? I'm actually half serious. I mean, alternatively, Jane Ozanne, a lesbian activist in the United Kingdom, has after the visit of the Archbishop of Canterbury, I think on Wednesday, her visit was on Thursday, or it might have been Tuesday and Wednesday, clearly brokered in some way by the Anglican authorities in the United Kingdom. Well, I think that in response to that, if we act quickly, there can be an official letter from howsoever many we are here, and the amount that chart that you put up. This many people have had a meeting in Hungary. We have our stories. Here are our mountain of books and our mountain of evidence, Pope Francis. We would like to present you with this. And the harm that not being able to access therapy might have given us. Thank God we have access therapy and we are all here. And perhaps 200 of us will turn up to deliver such a letter to the Pope. And I know actually that there are here some priests who are operating in the Vatican, and they're fiery priests. And they may have the proper protocols. But if Jane Ozanne can do it, then we can do it. I mean, we may consider it not worth our effort, and that our effort would be better spent producing those education materials somewhere, or convening pastors that really will take this seriously and start doing work on the ground. So it's strategy questions.
Mike. And to not stretch it too far, I don't know why it should just go to Pope Francis. There is more work to be done with the Archbishops of Canterbury and York. They are the ones who actually initiated the ban against conversion therapy in the United Kingdom. They conformed and complied with government wishes, and therefore they are complicit. So I don't think we need to look even as far as Rome. We also need to look very closely at what has happened in the Church of England.
Okay. In the back, there is
another.
Hello, I have a question from my friends, psychologists, who are interested in knowing what is so specific about working with SSA people. What should they pay attention to when counseling people with SSA? Is there anything very special about this kind of traumas?
Anytime you counsel a man or a woman with SSA, you'll want to know what their goals are. What is it that they want to accomplish? You know, it's not unusual for us to have clients who come. I've actually had gay clients come and say, you know what, Robert, I don't want to change my sexual orientation. I am here because I'm having trouble at work or because I'm having anxiety. And so in such a case, I will actually tell them, that's fine. I'm not here to change you. In the case of someone who wants to change, you'll always ask them, what are your goals? Sometimes I've had priests who tell me, you know, I'm not interested in marrying anyone because I can't. I just want to be able to live a chaste life. So first and most importantly is to ask clients, what are your goals in life? What do you want to accomplish?
Okay, thank you. In terms of what helps most profoundly this group of people and how, if you want to go quickly to deal with the real issues, since homosexual feelings are actually just the symptom of what the real issues are, I suggest that you evaluate your client and know them very well. I take a family and emotional history of every client I have, and they write a lot about themselves, and within those stories they tell me, I learn everything I need to know to go immediately into where the real wounds are, and it helps tremendously, so I'd recommend something like that. Also, in my opinion, it's very safe to assume, although you don't want to assume too much, but because it's not about you, it's about the client. You can safely assume that that person is undergoing a lot of repressed grief and anger, loss, shame, and to not deal with those issues is to not help them. And if you have a heart, most therapists here are going to be probably people of faith. And so if you are also a person of faith, get to their hearts. That's where these issues live. So you're not their father, you're their actual father, you're not their mother, you're not their priest, but they need to trust you. And to establish a safe, meaningful, authentic relationship professionally is absolutely essential so that you can get to their wounds and help them heal their wounds as profoundly as possible through therapy, through faith, psychologically, the whole thing.
Seems to also work better if it's a male client to be with a male therapist and a female client with a female therapist. For male clients, you need to be aware of what's called defensive detachment, and that results from the clients often having been hurt by other males, and they may react to you in ways you do not expect. So if there's ever any disconnect between you, the therapist, and the client, do your best to repair that as quickly as possible.
Okay, I ask you to mention the country also, because it helps us to know which country, which kind of questions has.
My name is Tom and I'm from Norway. My question is for Denise. What are the effects of detransitioning on family members?
That's a very interesting question. Generally, they're very excited about the loved one that is detransitioning. However, I do want to let you know that there are stories of those that have decided to detransition, and guess what, folks? Not everybody's real happy because they've gotten used to their loved one being in this other identity. Most times that's a mother, and yet I'm working with a female to male who recently has received rejection from her own father.
Hi, I'm from the UK. I have a question. Would you recommend talking to your children if one of the parents is struggling with unwanted SSA?
That's a good question. I would say it depends on the age of the children and also the context in which the question comes up. I would ask myself, what is my purpose in telling them? Why do they need to know? if a child is 14, 15, 16 years old and they know that something's going on, that mommy or daddy has someone else in their life, then I do think it's a good idea to tell them, not to keep secrets. Children who are 4, 5, 6, 7 years old could never comprehend what's going on, and in that case, it's not advised.
I've got a comment on how you do that. We say this to wives all the time, or the opposite person, whoever they are in the relationship. It's best, in my opinion, to talk about the wounds first. It's probably not a good idea to say all of a sudden to children or the partner in the marriage, your dad has homosexual feelings, or your mom has homosexual feelings. It's like a bomb. So you might start, like we tell clients often, to start with the wounds. Hey, when I was a kid, I had some issues, and there was a really tough time for me, and it's a compassionate response. And so because of those issues, sometimes I feel homosexual feelings. Usually kids or even wives, spouses are going to have a better response when you start with the real issue first.
I just want to comment on something that I felt when Denise was talking. She mentioned that when she was 9 years old, her father basically dumped all of his issues on her, and how overwhelming and traumatizing it was. It's not just that they can't comprehend, it's that the parent who's an adult is dumping everything on them as if they're supposed to help facilitate it. And so then what you do in such a case is you are parentifying the child. And that's very typical in families where there's SSA or transgender issues.
As Robert had just said this, it just brought something to mind of a daughter that had contacted me, and she said, I've read a lot of your articles and I agree with a lot of what you have to say, but where I disagree with you is my father needs me. I've been taking care of him all my life and he needs me.
Javier from Colombia. I would like to know which the relation of people with SSA and sensibility. Sensibility. People are not, of course, are not born gay, but probably they have a sensibility, a high sensibility.
Very sensitive person.
Sensitive person.
Okay.
Well, some people are, this gene study that just came out by Ganna, G-A-N-N-A, and colleagues this year, 2019, found that the genes that may be associated with same-sex behavior, some of them are related to psychological problems, mental disorders, such as depression, manic depression, even said psychosis. And so somebody could be predisposed to depression or sensitivity. There can be personality traits. And for someone who then has life experiences in addition, let's say maybe they experienced childhood sexual abuse, they had wounds in their relationship with their parents, or family members, or bullying with peers. And they also had a predisposition towards sensitivity or depression or whatever. It may impact them differently than someone who did not have a genetic predisposition towards depression or sensitivity. So that sensitivity or tendency toward depression would not make someone homosexual. You couldn't predict from someone's genes. The researcher said you cannot predict from someone's genes what their sexual behavior will be, or that there'll be homosexuality. That these genes have a small, any one of them have a very small influence, and taken together, they only can influence sexual orientation or behavior somewhat. Certainly experiences overwhelmingly the influence. But these, predispositions that are genetic do interact with life experiences, so the development is complex. But the good news is that since same-sex orientation is influenced by both biological factors somewhat and life experiences mostly that also interact, so it's a complex human trait. This is the same as, this is also true of other complex human traits therapists help people diminish or overcome every day.
Hello, this is Kaiman from Hong Kong. Now, in Asia, in fact, I think there are not many countries or regions which have laws against the therapy of homosexuality, but there is an exception in Taiwan. Just around last year, they passed same-sex marriage, and also at the same time, they passed a law prohibiting the therapists in providing help for the homosexual people. So my question is for Laura, with your experience, what is your advice of our moves to try to overturn this law in Taiwan, say? And also, a question for, say, maybe for IFTCC. Is there any role for IFTCC to doing this, really doing work internationally here in Asia as well? Thank you.
Well, I mean, all activist activities possible, beginning with prayer and testimonies of people who changed, pastors uniting together to take back their country, you know, demonstrating together, getting training and activism together, going to their capital to pray at the Capitol and sing praises to God, public demonstration. Therapists, I don't know if people are allowed to talk or write about this at all. If they can, yes, get it into the media, talk about it everywhere you can, and you just keep working at it in every way you can create and think about it over time. And you want to change the opinions of the public and educate them as to the wide-ranging destructive consequences of this. There will be marriages that can't be saved. All those people who are attracted to both sexes, which is most people who experience same-sex attraction, who tend to prefer to be in opposite-sex relationships, and who may need help not to stray. They can't get therapy to help them diminish their attractions that may tempt them. And all of the recognized disorders that can't be treated. Sexual compulsive thoughts, sexual pornography addiction, sexual addiction, so many things that could only be treated if they're directed towards the opposite sex and not the same sex. All these harms need to be brought to light and move people's hearts. You guys are activists, what do you think? Sorry.
First of all, thank you very much, Professor Kwan, for coming here to our conference. You're the only one from Asia, beside Pauline. And I think we in the IFTCC, we would really like to work more together with people from Asia, with you, with your organization, to find out together what we can do. We have heard from Florida yesterday that they were successful in overturning, thank you, overturning a therapy ban. So I think we can do something, especially if we do it together. Thank you.
Professor, it was such an honor for some of us to attend Taiwan's Global Rainbow Crosser Alliance event. Ola Lisznik from Poland, Matthew Grech from Malta, and myself were given that honor. I was amazed when I visited the offices of Jenny Lee in Taiwan. This is a woman who has worked for, 30 years. Do you know, folks, that these Taiwan people, ex-gay people, have 3 offices on the tiny island of Taiwan and 11 full-time workers. They are running workshops for people with AIDS. parents of ex-gay people and parents of children who are gay. They are running workshops and all sorts of training for people wanting out of homosexuality. What I was left with was, we have a great deal to learn from Asia. And the International Federation for Therapeutic and Counseling Choice cannot succeed without Asia. So we put ourselves in the position of asking for some cooperation with you, and we hope that it would be something that would be developed and supported. I'm sure it would be here. So we are honored that you have come, and we're most thankful and grateful for all that you are doing there. The event, ladies and gentlemen, look on the IFTCC Core Issues Trust website and look at the quality of what they did. Do you know the last event? Well, let me just tell you very quickly. The first thing they had was a meeting where we looked at the human rights issues, and I think it was 23 nations testified to what was happening in their country. And the Taiwanese had largely covered the cost of allowing that to happen. They gave some of us the privilege of addressing the Taiwan Legislation Council. There was endless media because at the same time 200,000 people turned out for a gay pride march in Taiwan. After that initial meeting, well, let me just end. There was a celebration that they put on. Do you know, friends, there were well over 1,200 people there who had come from all over Taiwan. If you look at the videos, you're just amazed, or at least I was, in terms of the strength, the quality of the entertainment that they provided. It was outstanding. And I would have to say we have a great deal to learn from Asia. Thank you. I'm sorry, and one more thing. I want to pay tribute to clinical psychologist, Dr. Melvin Wong. I know a friend of Keith Venom's for many years. Professor Wong, you can get his English book online. Do you remember the title, Crystal?
How to raise gender-confident kids.
How to Raise Gender-Confident Kids. Get the book, folks. Professor Melvin Wong, he's been working in every ex-gay, Exodus International, Exodus Global Alliance. These folk know what they're talking about.
Claire, Hungary. Yesterday, Mike said that IFTCC accepts fluidity in sexuality, but not in gender. And my question refers to this because when you say this, you mean sexuality as a feeling, as an emotion, because we live in a time when emotion leads everything, but it's not a mature behavior, I guess. So is it wise to emphasize the difference between emotions and actions, and identity can be identity led by emotions? Because I myself as a person, I'm much more and different from my emotions. I'm not equal with my emotions. So should someone be led by emotions in such an extent that his or her identity is granted by that?
I knew David would do that. I knew he'd pass it right down to me. Let me just comment briefly on biological truth and then how we feel. I think it's very dangerous to go down the route that we're going down in the world right now, which is to say that how you feel is more important than biological truth. It's not. Okay? We had a woman in the United States who wanted everyone to accept that she was a cat, okay? And to treat her that she was a cat. So our question is, how far is this going to go? Okay? They make distinctions between gender and biology, but the truth is that without biology, you will not have gender. It's impossible. The reason that people want to be the opposite gender, if you want to use that term, is because they are aware of the opposite gender. And there's probably a payoff in being who they really aren't. So I would say feelings are important, yes, but what is predominant, what is most important is the biology, if that makes any sense. Anyone else?
A very simple one for those of you that are part of the community of faith. When I was about 7 years old, my mother set me down and said, in life you're going to have faith, facts, and feelings. It's a train. Life works best if faith drives the train, facts are in the middle, and feelings are the caboose.
The caboose is the end part of the train, the last carriage. So I don't know if I said something wrong or inaccurate, but what I was trying to say is our biology is not fluid, but that sexual feelings can be all over the place. That's what I was trying to say.
Livia from Slovakia. A question for Andrea, please. We have heard about some prevention programs that could be taken to schools, and you mentioned a few times that it wouldn't be possible in England. I understand why, but how about faith schools? And I don't even mean just Christian schools, but schools of Jewish schools, Muslim schools. Can these schools have any prevention programs? Thanks. In England.
Okay, so this is actually quite complex in terms of what's happening on the ground in the United Kingdom. The reality is that our Church of England schools, well, originally education was essentially was Christian, but we conceded education to the state. We do have Church of England schools and Catholic schools. Our Church of England schools educate 1 million children in the United Kingdom. But in effect, they receive money from the state and they roll out the state curriculum. And Stonewall, the LGBT lobby group, has written many of the policy agendas and the anti-bullying legislation and the anti-bullying policy in the schools. There is a reality that with an increasingly Islamic population in pockets of the United Kingdom, the schools become, there are schools that become Islamic that don't necessarily adhere to the state curriculum, but they are left alone and not challenged in the way that the Christian schools are challenged, or in which the way, in fact, the Christian schools just give up their ethos. But the Muslim schools demand preferential treatment and receive easily preferential treatment. So we have things like public school exams are moved in order to accommodate Ramadan. We have halal meat, we have segregation of children, we have the learning of the Quran, we have Friday afternoon off. These things are realities in our schools. We have Muslim men that are headmasters and women that do the teaching. We have in some of our schools. I think that what we're headed towards is there's going to be a clash. There's going to be a clash between the Muslims and the LGBT agenda. We're beginning to see that in Birmingham. and that's as yet unresolved, but I think we're going to see more and more clashes like that. And I think it's not as easy as people might think to do co-belligerence, because not all religions have the same thing to say about what marriage is. So, for instance, in Islam, the men can have multiple wives. They will look to the mosque to dispense Sharia law, and that's above the state law. And I say this as again as someone coming from the United Kingdom, where many of our cities actually now have Muslim mayors, where local authorities are run by people that promote Islam, and where the mosque is very dominant in terms of dispensing law in the local communities. So again, it's another warning to nations if the churches don't speak out. You legislate, because at the end of the day, you've got to look at what you want in terms of policy. Do you want a nation with a Christian backdrop, a nation with a secular backdrop, look at communism, or a nation with an Islamic backdrop, look at Iraq? How they all have outcomes. It's not, the secularism isn't neutral. These things vie in the public space. That's why at Christian Concern, I contend passionately for the uniqueness of the Christian to legislate against a Christian moral framework which brings true dignity and true freedom for all.
Somebody was here in this area earlier.
Here you go.
Hi, it's Ingo from Germany. I have one more question about parents, actually, and it ties in a little bit with what Denise said last. You said there is a woman, she understands most of what you say and agrees to it, but she says, my dad needs me. And my spontaneous question was, is that a good thing or is it not? So the question is, where do you draw the line between being helpful and supportive and getting entangled in codependency with your parents?
Yeah. I don't think it's a good thing, because we have a daughter that has been taking care of her father all of her life. She has given her life over to her father. It's very unfair of that situation. I'm sorry, my brain's starting to go dead, so I'm trying to remember. So that's, my opinion on that. As Robert had said, it's, then where you're becoming the parent. You're taking care of the parent, and it's unfair to her. And I'm sorry, what was the rest of your question?
Yeah, where do you draw the line between wanting to be helpful? Okay, sorry. Where do you draw the line between wanting to be helpful and supportive, I guess, which is a natural thing. You don't want to abandon your parents, you love them. But on the other hand, getting into a codependency, really, where you give up your own life, as you said. Isn't that a very critical question? Where is this line? How far do you go?
Yeah, and I think I faced that line when my dad had left, and just the fact of saying, I'm not in a good place right now. When I told that postmaster to send that letter back, I was not in a good place. And to recognize that, to be an adult, and to have those boundaries, healthy boundaries, for where I was mentally and emotionally. Each person, because of the circumstances that they're faced, the challenges are different. So they've got to take a look at what's really healthy for them, where do they see that cutoff, to be loving towards that parent, to be able to say lovingly to them, I'm not doing well. I need some space. I need some time to go through some healing myself, and to recognize when we become enablers, because a lot of us family members admit to that. We begin to look at their needs above ours, and so we will sacrifice our lives at a very high cost many of the times. I also wanted to add, before I forget, because the last slide I forgot to show on there, a picture of my dad, as he had transitioned during those last few months, actually just the last week before he died. My mother asked him, did this make you happy? And these were his words that let me know more about it. He said to her, this did not bring me the satisfaction that I thought that it would. So that told me all those wounds that he experienced as a little boy never went away. He could have had all the surgeries he wanted. He could have looked like the most beautiful woman. But as we were talking here about the heart, you have to get to the heart. You have to get to the heart.
So I had a man come into the office this week called Steve, who'd been prompted to get in touch because he'd seen Peter Benjamin, who's here. He'd seen, and it's very interesting, isn't it, to have Denise and Peter at this conference. So you've had the man who, he has a son and a daughter, Peter does. But he'd got in touch with Christian Concern because he'd seen Peter Benjamin's story. But what was interesting about this man was that he had got onto the Christian Concern. He was a lawyer, and he'd got onto the Christian Concern website on the list, and he joined the list because he wanted to see what the opposition was saying. And he'd done that as Steph. He joined as Steph, and he left his wife and he left his children, and he'd lived in a in a relationship with another man. He described it as a heterosexual relationship for 6 years, until the man found out that he was in fact had been born a man. So that he kept a secret, and the man booted him out, and he ended up homeless and got picked up by a church. And the church, but what was fascinating was that he then came in. He then became healed and transformed, and came in as Steve, but he still hadn't told his children yet. So he's been living as Steve, but his children had totally cut off any contact. But I asked him, again, a little bit like Peter Benjamin, there was no satisfaction. He was living a lie, and he'd lost everything. He'd lost the love, the woman he'd only ever loved, which was his wife, and he lost his children. And he didn't know how to put that right again. So I thought that was interesting, like in that context.
I just wanted to make a little comment about codependency. I always say that codependency is characterized by a situation in which we don't allow other people to suffer the consequences of their actions. I've had clients tell me, you know, Robert, I have to go visit my mother this weekend. You do? Yes, I have to visit her every weekend. And why is that? If I don't visit her, she'll be lonely. How old is your mother? She's 45. Is she capable of making friends? Yes. Are there other groups that she belongs to, places where she can meet other women? Yes. So how is it that you got the job of taking care of your mother? That's an enmeshed and codependent relationship. Okay?
Okay, one last question. I'm so sorry, but one last question.
Okay, so my name is Gintautas. I'm from Lithuania. There were news about some better direction in the medical world. Perhaps Dr. Venom could comment on that. The Australian doctors signed a petition, I think 100 of them, from what I read, against chemical castration of children. And also in the UK, the Tavistock clinic employees, some of them protested again. Is this a sign that people are sort of getting a bit fed up with this fashion, transgender fashion among young people, and this, how is it called, late onset gender dysphoria? That, okay, is there some signs of hope that the doctors will wake up and stop, damaging these children and young people?
I think we are witnessing a cultural phenomena, and ultimately it will end like all cultural phenomena do. And what I say is our society became very gay-friendly when everyone either had someone in their family or someone in their extended friends that they knew that was gay. And I think society will change when everyone has someone in their family or someone that is a friend that is ex-gay.
Okay, well, we have 3 states in the United States that plan to pass a ban against mutilating trans children's bodies. This is the next legislative session in the United States.
Okay. Thank you for questions. Thank you for answers. If anybody of you have questions, feel free to find these people. You know, if you are success, it's good. And I give mic to the closer time. It's your turn.
Friends, I must urge you, please, to have a look at the declaration that we're putting out in the name of the IFTCC tomorrow. I don't have the Slovak language translation yet, but I am hoping that it will come soon. If it's available for tomorrow, I will make sure it's available. But English speakers, Hungarian speakers, and Polish speakers, it would be very useful if you could look at it. Tomorrow, we intend to sign it. Crystal and I are going to sign it, but I'm really hoping there will be others who will sign it with us, and other organizations, if you can consider signing it, because you've read it and you agree with it. It's not perfect, but it's hopefully an expression of what has come out of our conference. I would be very grateful if you could take a copy. They're on the IFTCC table in the foyer. Thank you so much. Have a good night, and we'll see you tomorrow at 7:15. Oh, one last thing, may I say, to those friends who are not Christians, who do not have a belief in Christianity, even so, you're welcome just to come and be with us. We would love to have you. You are so welcome. And we do want to again stress how grateful we are for those who have come from other faiths and no faith. Thank you so much for giving us the privilege of getting to know you a little bit. Thank you.